Okay. Well, good evening, good afternoon if you're out west. Welcome again to Let's Talk Radio with Robert Vaughn and our other host, Mike Shomo. Today we have some very special guests, and we're going to cover a subject that I think will be of interest to everyone. The subject for tonight is beauty standards in social media. And our guests for tonight are, first of all, Dr.Anisa Shomo. She's a board-certified family medicine physician. She serves as the director of Family Medicine Scholars Program at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. She's a graduate of Shaw High School in East Cleveland and earned a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish and Doctor of Medicine degrees from The Ohio State University.
Go Bucks.
She also has a show, Dr. Shomo Knows, and she has some great things on it. I know that she has yoga on Sundays. So if anybody likes to do yoga, she does yoga on Sundays. And she covers various other topics. Her first book, Health is Love, was recently released and is available for purchase on her website, www.drshomo.knows. And additionally, we have Jennifer Falcon. Jennifer Falcon is a doctor of philosophy, a lecturer in the analytic writing program at the University of California, San Diego. And I'm glad I met her because I have a couple of scripts that we'll talk about later. She earned her PhD in rhetoric and composition from the University of Texas at El Paso. They also have a pretty good basketball team too, in case you guys didn't know that. Her research focuses on digital literacy, sports rhetoric, and digital rhetoric. Much of her research focuses on how theories and practices in procedural rhetoric, electricity, and digital rhetoric can be used to enhance multimodal composition arrangements in first-year writing curriculum. So she not only teaches, but she creates the curriculum to teach the teachers how to teach, I guess would be a good way to put it. And also we're joined today by Dr. Jamie Evans. She's a psychiatrist and also a family physician who is a native of the Bronx, New York. Dr. Evans also has a master's degree in public health with a concentration in health behavior and health education. She currently serves as an associate medical director for a national telepsychiatry company. She also does part-time work for an urgent care clinic in the Triangle region of North Carolina, where she also is a supervisor and backup supervisor for several physician's assistants. Now, you probably know a little bit about Mike Shomo and I won't get into our resumes because it would take the whole show. So suffice to say, that's why we're a host and a co-host, and that's why we bring in expertise. So I just want to say, it seems nowadays that social media has become a part of our everyday lives. With the advent of surveillance capitalism, data analytics, contagion, and artificial intelligence, algorithms have, to a great degree, have taken control of many people's thoughts and lives. One of the most insidious aspects of this social media takeover is the fact that it presents us with beauty standards that are not only unrealistic, but are computer enhanced so that no one can meet the standard of beauty glorified in these images that are presented to us. Hence the title of our show, Beauty Standards in Social Media. I did a photo shoot not too long ago with an artist I managed. And after the pics were done and edited, I turned to the photographer and I said, well, God, I said, she looks better in the picture than she does in real life. He said, of course, duh. He said, I know. He said, nobody looks that good. He said, I make them look that good, better than they do in real life. And they kind of hit me and say she couldn't possibly look like this when she goes out and performs, So I'm going through my mind, so this is a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. And Dr. Shomo, what happens to a person when they cannot meet the standards of beauty presented to them? What happens to them? What goes on in their head? How does it affect them? Let's start off there and just Mike, everybody just jump in when you want to.
Well, I just want to first say thank you for having us, letting us women take over your show. So I know Dr. Falcon we both went to Ohio State together. We were roomies. We were in the same fraternity, co-ed Latinx fraternity, Kappa Psi Lambda. And I also know Jamie from residency. She lived here in Cincinnati with me, and I do miss you dearly. I wish you would move back here. Went to the University of Michigan, but we still love you. That's okay.
You're still my heart. You're still my heart, even though you got that red thing. It's all good.
But I just wanted to just first kind of introduce, why so the thing about me, like there's a lot of things that I can't include on my CV. I've been working as a physician for, I don't know. I mean, I graduated high school almost 20 years ago. And just since high school, I've done a lot with mentoring since forever. So I've always really been into mentoring. And because I remember like when I was even in middle school, I mentored elementary kids. And so for me, one of the first jobs that I had was taking care of young kids. I worked in school-based health. So in order for me to really understand, like, how do I relate to these young people? How do I talk to them in their well visits? I had to start doing some research about, things that were affecting them. And it was kind of interesting because at the same time I started doing that, I started seeing that a lot of these same things were affecting older adults as well. Like, women my age, women older than me as well. And it seemed like it was just really a lot of like self-esteem chipping away. So I've learned more and more. I read a lot. So I love reading. So I have read a lot of different books that have different perspectives on, why this phenomenon is happening, of, why our self-esteem is being chipped away. Why are we constantly being marketed to? And a lot of it just has to do with capitalism. So people want to sell us a product, and it's been this way forever. I mean, capitalism has been a part of the US forever. Originally, we had TV commercials, we had magazines, we had posters, all this sort of thing. So now it's just a different avenue. The problem is though that because of that ability to have algorithms, it becomes a little bit more scary. I'm direct to eyelashes. What about this? What about this? What about this? So it becomes this game of like the ante up of how can we take this to the next step? How can we get this person hooked on the next thing? The next thing that's hot in beauty. So the beauty industry is $1 billion industry, as most people know. And it's just one of those things of, you constantly have to be
Okay, she faded on us.
changing things to be bigger, better. But the problem is, at what point does it happen with all of these things that are targeted to people as beauty?
Right.
The one thing that I've noticed, some years ago, I saw the young ladies, they were wearing eyelashes, they put them on and everything. But then like about a year or two ago, they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and longer. And I saw a young lady with 2-inch eyelashes. And I'm saying, like, what is the reason for that? And I'm saying they saw somebody else and they say, well, I want to get bigger and better. And then they see these music videos and the video vixens, and they don't know that when they come out, they got people to take that stuff off of them. There's a friend of my wife's, and she's had these false eyelashes, and she's in her 50s or 60s, and she's doing that, and now she has no eyelashes. They've been on and off so much, and you see her without these eyelashes, you'd be like, whoa. She just looks funny. But here's another thing:
right.
is that nobody, because
and they can cause a lot of I was just saying that they can cause a lot of health problems. Like people can literally go blind over those eyelashes that they're wearing. So
you can die.
And that's what I'm
because I don't know if you remember, Anna got them, and she just go out when we go out. She put on, want to do something look a little cuter than usual. She put the eyelashes on. But let me tell you, she got this infection in her eye. I forgot what it was called, but they say it could go to the brain and kill her. She just went to the doctor because her eye was swollen and hurt. But they were saying this is some serious stuff. So you can die from this. So she stopped wearing eyelashes.
Right.
One of the things,
they do
So
this.
It's probably what's called orbital cellulitis. That's a medical emergency.
In spite of the risk.
Right. I know one of the things is that.
Right. So let's talk to Dr. Evans.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
It's okay.
I was going to ask Dr. Evans to chime in about just because you asked me a question about how it's affecting people's mental health.
Mhm.
And I figured, Dr. Evans, I'll let you really answer that question as a psychiatrist, as a resident psychiatrist here on the panel.
All right, thank you very much. So, you know, I want to just kind of emphasize just an agreement with a lot of what you said, essentially regarding, you know, marketing something, marketing the next biggest thing, you know, and having these idealized standards of beauty that sometimes are not achievable, or to a point, forces women into feeling like, okay, I cannot be comfortable or, you know, secure within my normal self because I have to, you know, achieve some other standard of beauty. So from the mental health aspect of things, I think I've seen a lot more social media impact in adolescents, in teens, as they're coming into the emergency room. So I do a lot of emergency room work and medical floors. And so in the past year, just alone with the pandemic, we've seen like a huge increase in children and adolescents coming into the emergency departments. And I cannot tell you how many times I have spoken to, especially late adolescents, who have had impacts related to social media. So I already have a bit of an acknowledged bias towards like social media. There's some amazing uses for it and its ability to be able to promote positivity, like this podcast, but at the same time, things are very different. I went to school in high school in the mid 90s. And during that time, people bullied you in person. Now they're doing it online. And they are picking at, kids' features and parts of themselves that, are natural, normal, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they're seeing that they're getting depressed, they're getting super anxious, they're overdosing. And we're seeing a lot more of that, serious overdoses in teens who are coming in. And I think a lot of that is related to the fact that, teenagers have a lot going on in their brains. So, actually up until the age of 30 in some people, everyone is different. The brain is still developing. So you don't solidify all of those, connections, those synapses until sometimes into your early 30s. And so what you're finding is that, early on, the stuff that matures early is like your risk and reward system. So that's why teenagers tend to be more impulsive. And then the stuff that solidifies a lot later are those things that are involved in like impulse control. And so what you'll typically find is that if someone has some sort of early trauma or exposure to things, whether it's bullying or just low self-esteem as related to not having a nurturing environment, that is going to be devastating in terms of that person's development, in terms of an adolescent's development and into adulthood. So I think that part of that is definitely impacting the development of a lot of stuff. We're still learning more about environmental factors and how those are strongly impacting kids as they're growing up with different traumas. And honestly, this can even be considered a form of trauma in that sense, when people have an expectation or you're not meeting a particular expectation and you're looking at something and saying, well, what's wrong with me the way I am? Especially if that's accompanied by someone in person telling you that you're not good enough.
Well, I was following this lady on Facebook. Her name was Fatima Parker. Mm-hmm. And she has this thing about body shaming and loving people for who they are. And, and she has like older people, what's that, what they have the leg where they swell up the
lymphedema
and stuff like that, and showing that those people are beautiful too. They got models and stuff. And it's the thing that I don't understand is that people do this, women do this mostly for other women, because men don't care about that. They don't care. You look decent, everything's cool. We don't care about that.
No, I mean, there's the whole thing about it is, part of it is like, so there's a lot of things that go into it, right? So when you're dealing with a capitalistic society, people are trying to survive and live. So that's kind of like one of the biggest motivators for why people do it. So people will generally, wear, tons of lashes, wear a bunch of hair, like bundles and bundles of hair, and have a bunch of makeup. They may or may not get plastic surgery. There's a lot of plastic surgery going on. But the biggest thing about it is people are competing. You know what I mean? It's becoming a thing of like, well, if I can look like this, then I can get this man, or I can get this job, or I can be this kind of influencer. So especially with the social media, with this influencer situation, where there's money that's tied to it. So because Jamie
Competing
sent me
against who though? Competing against who?
competing against other women, competing against
That's what I'm
competing
saying.
against, but it's not necessarily that they're motivated by other women. It's that a lot of times they feel like in order to compete with other women for husbands, for money, for status, for whatever it is that they're desiring, they feel like they have to look a certain way. And so that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is sometimes they're doing it because, like I said, if they're an influencer on social media, they may feel like they have to look a certain way. Like you look at, the Kardashians, that sort of thing. They are $1 billion family now from having millions of, having a bunch of plastic surgeries, all this sort of thing, and marketing that. Benny sent me, Dr. Falcon sent me a video of a woman who did a, what is it called? Like a TED Talk, or it's like a TikTok of a TED Talk, where it was talking about Kylie Jenner, how she changed her whole face. And now she's marketing lipstick that's going to make you look like her, even though she doesn't look like her, so there's a lot of money to be made often, that people feel that there's a lot of money to be made from buying into this idea that you have to look a certain way. Do you want to talk about that more, Dr. Falcon?
Yeah, I have a couple things to add. One of what I think part of what we're touching on is that I was reading an article kind of to prepare for this. Came out in 2018, and it's about how social media can negatively impact the self-image, or how, and it's primarily focusing on young women. I think it was mostly teens. What this study identified is they refer to it as upward social comparison targets. And so they'll use their social media, and this is what you two have kind of been talking about, is that they'll use their social media in a way that they are looking at these other accounts or whoever they follow, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is they're using, TikTok, Snapchat, whoever it is that they follow, that their peers, maybe in the peer age group, they're not family, maybe it's not people they necessarily know in their everyday life. It could be celebrities too, obviously. But they look at them as sort of that's the target of who they want to become. And I think we're kind of all talking about, or what you've all been talking about, is just sort of how you see that kind of occur in their daily lives and what happens as a result of that, which part of it I think is the bigger, better, keep kind of pushing this is what someone looks like, I want to look like that too, or I want to look better than that. I know that someone brought up Photoshop and things like that. Yeah, people don't look like they do in their photos. I actually used to work for a photographer, and I did the Photoshop, and customers would come in and they would love their photos. And one woman brought in a friend, I remember, and her friend said, "That is not you. You do not look like that." And the woman said, "But I could." And she was happy, so I mean, and you kind of see that. But I think the difference is, of course, if we're talking about younger women and girls, teens, or people not particularly mature or savvy to the machine that's sort of behind all of this. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what that TikTok points out, is that there's an industry behind it. And, you want to look a certain way. There's products to help you achieve that. And someone who's kind of savvy to this might know, okay, well, that's all just a marketing ploy. This is, right, I'm not really going to look like this if I use this. But there are other people that, if you're thinking this is going to help me achieve my goal or that social target that I have, then you're going to buy into it. And then it just becomes like anything else. You're going to continue to buy into it and work through and, work to achieve all of that. And, where does that end?
I saw
now with this,
I saw a lady one time in the magazine I was reading, and she spent over $150,000 to look like Barbie.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw her. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing is, but that's what the problem is though, that kind of stuff used to make the news, right? Now it's every day. Like everybody's trying to look like somebody else.
Yeah, now that's the norm. That's not unusual anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now with this, would you consider this, maybe this is to Dr. Evans, would you consider this a disorder of some type? And if there is arrested development, how does that present, or how does that play out? Because I had someone, the reason I asked you, I had someone propose a couple of weeks ago that says, well, you know, everybody is trying to live up to a standard of beauty, and then the guys want to be tough guys, or they want to be rappers. And it says nobody can achieve that. And they say the way that it plays out a lot of times is sometimes through violence, you know, because there's frustration and there's anger because they can never be the ideal of what they want to be. And they feel, you know, like you say, arrested development, they don't really emotionally develop. So they may be 27 or 28 years old, you know, but they're, you know, if you step on their shoe, they have a temper tantrum like maybe a 6 or 7-year-old. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Ooh, that is very, very loaded question, and it has a lot of different layers. So let's do the first part of that. Can all of this be considered a disorder? I would be careful to pathologize when a person is trying to meet or try to exceed a particular standard of beauty, because it is something that is so common. And it doesn't mean that that person necessarily has some sort of mental health disorder.
Okay.
They could, however, trying to achieve these certain, you know, standards of beauty, these idealized standards of beauty, they certainly could develop anxiety, depression, especially if other people are providing pressure for them, you know, or your friends are talking about it and everybody's talking about, you know, hey, let's go and get this surgery. Let's do these things to enhance ourselves, because, you know, so women want to enhance themselves. Sometimes they want to, you know, do different things with their hair. And I think that part of that is cultural, and there are great things about them, you know, to be able to, you know, enhance certain things. But to the extent that a person's whole identity and, you know, self-esteem and being is hinged on the way that they look because they cannot be comfortable within themselves, is definitely problematic. But I wouldn't call it a disorder per se. It's certainly
it's not in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical. It's not a recognized.
Not that in particular. Now you're talking about what we mentioned earlier with body dysmorphia, literally someone looking at themselves and really it's pathological. They look at themselves and they're like, you know, my nose is over here. And it's like, no, you looked perfectly fine. But what they see in the mirror, they cannot get out of their heads. I don't think this is completely body dysmorphia more than it is just looking at a standard. And it's also socially trained, you know, even when I was in high school, you know, it wasn't cool to be a dark-skinned girl. You know, it wasn't cool to be smart. It wasn't cool to be, there were so many different things. It wasn't cool to be, I was the fat person and I was $150 at that time. That, you know what I mean? So there was that portion.
Even being thick wasn't like, so now everybody's trying to be thick, but that wasn't even a trend when we were young. Like
it wasn't. Not at all. Not at all. Exactly. So
I always felt like when I was young, I like to play basketball and I'm, you know, 5'11". I said, man, if I could be as tall as Shomo, my Shomo, if I could be 6'6", I'd be in the NBA, you know?
Yeah.
There are men who get plastic surgery to be taller. Men are getting pec implants, Botox. So it does affect men too. Yes. But the issue is with, you know, a lot of it is like hierarchies. So men have a lot of privilege, right? So they can get jobs and their expectations in life are different. So for women, a lot of it is just the way that we're socialized into thinking that we have that, you know, there's a lot of policing of women, of young women, that you should look a certain way, you should be a certain way, you should act, you know, act like a lady, that sort of thing. There's a lot of that from a young age, a lot of social messages that we get from that. And so, you know, it's a lot harder for us to shake that idea of like, what does acting like a lady mean? What does looking like a lady mean? Because we make so much money for these industries. They literally put so much money and effort into having, like, chipping away at our self-esteem every day. And like, even before social media, this was a thing, but it's just a little bit different now. And it's just a little bit on a more personalized scale.
I was at the chiropractor's office today, and I was sitting there, you know, waiting to get checked out. And the young lady couldn't have been no more than about 18 or 19. She walked in with some shorts and her butt cheeks was hanging out of the shorts. And I'm saying, like, you know, you go back to acting like a lady, looking like a lady. She wasn't looking like a perception of what we thought a lady should look like, you know? But when I left there, I was going to my car and here was 2, 3 other women walking down the street with the same thing. And I'm talking about, she could have just had on a thong or something that was so much meat hanging out, you know? But I guess, you know, we come up in a different area where if you tried to walk out the house like that, you know, your mother would have snatched you back in there and said, you're gonna put some clothes on. You know?
Right. Yeah. And that's what's hard at times for people to really understand that. Like a lot of times people say, oh, you don't respect yourself, that sort of thing. But young women today, they're like, that's not why we wearing this. Like, it's not about respect, that sort of thing. But it is one of those things of like, there has been hypersexualization of young women and young men in our culture. I mean, there's a lot of different theories of why that is. So I've read, you know, like I said, I read a lot. There's one book that's called Hood Feminism by Nikki Kendall. And she talked about how, you know, so there's, you know, there's a lot of perspectives on it. But the thing about listening to different people's perspectives is why I love reading, because it's like, it gives you an insight into other people's brain and how they think and what they notice and what they pay attention, right? So one of the things that she said was when they started locking people up, the war on drugs, when they started having so many men be locked away, women were in a place where they were literally competing for men because all the men are gone. And then it's like, you know, and then when a man comes home from prison, Black women, we work forever. And Black and brown women, we've worked forever. So it's just one of those things of when you come from prison, you know, you are there with your woman. She's been fine while you've been in prison. She's been supporting the family, holding down the house. And then what is your role? And so she talked about like, you know, how this toxic masculinity kind of culture came out of men trying to really assert their power in a way that was different, because now their place in the family has been questioned. You know, do we really need you? I can go and work and support myself. And so, you know, and so then it becomes this hyper feminization of women. So all of like gender, it's called like the performance of gender. So the way that gender is performed in different cultures differs, right? Because you go to a lot of places in Africa and it's hot there. People still may or may not be wearing any clothes at all, you know? So it's just one of those things of what is different in different cultures is different, and it has a lot to do with, you know, the society that's around you. So that's one theory that she talked about. So there was another woman who, another book by a white woman, her name is Peggy Orenstein. And she talked about, her book is called Girls and Sex. So in Girls and Sex, Peggy Orenstein talked about, so actually it's 2 different books. There's the Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein. There's another book called Talk to Me First by Deborah Rothman. And I've read those books because they're geared toward how do we as adults talk to young people about sex and sexuality. And so what Deborah Rothman said was what happened was in the 80s, when the AIDS epidemic came out, as Americans, we wanted to start talking more about sex because we wanted people to practice safe sex and use condoms and that sort of thing. It became more of a national conversation. But a lot of the industries took that as a way to have an end to, because sex sells, right? So to have a way in to really market like, well, look like this, look sexy, be sexy, all that sort of thing. And so then high-speed internet came around, you know, in the 2000s, and the porn industry took off. So this is what Peggy Orenstein talks about in Girls and Sex, is the influence that porn culture has really had. Porn is the reason why a lot of women shave their vaginas. That wasn't a thing really before that. I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't as common. Brazilian waxes were not as common. She broke down the data of like people having surgeries on their labia since porn, the people having more butt surgeries since that happened. So there's all types of stuff that you don't even think about. But then when people present it and present the data, you be like, well, wow, you know. So it's one of those things of, you know, it's easy to talk to the young women and say, why are you looking like that? It's harder to advocate for them and say, why are we objectifying our young women like this? Why are we not educating them and giving them more opportunities so that they can be, you know, have more goals in life than being somebody's wife or competing for other women, for men who may or may not, you know, treat them well, that sort of thing, because a lot of the toxic masculinity has to do with, you know, being abusive and that sort of thing to women. So there's a lot of that swirls around, and you're just like, what we really need to do is just try to advocate for our young women to view themselves differently, to view themselves as more than just walking around with shorts on. So it's, you know, it's easy to say why you want to look like that. It's a whole other thing to say, what are these young people learning at school? Or what are they learning about life? You know, like just trying to really understand them and try to help them reshape some of those thoughts that they may have about themselves.
Well, see, one of the things, and you know, when I talk about and do a speech or something, I talk about giving our youth another window, you know, because they keep looking out the same window, getting the same thing. They need another window to look out at.
Yeah.
Dr. Falcon, being out in the West Coast of Southern California, do you think it's that much more prevalent, some of these body image issues?
Without a doubt.
But, okay, well, I'm confused there. You know.
Well, you're from LA originally.
Yeah, so yeah, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I could definitely tell you, like, there was always a difference. Like, I'm more from
Yeah, okay. That's what I
When you
thought.
go down on Venice Beach, man, you see everything you want to see.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
go to West LA, I definitely see more obvious signs of plastic surgery, like looking at people, just even from a young age, like that's not how you naturally look, right? Or just knowing that there are tons and tons of doctors' offices there that kind of like specialize in that. I now live in San Diego, and yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly like the beach culture, you kind of like that's sort of like, I mean, I don't want to generalize and say, but like, you know, see people at the beach, maybe they're wearing different kinds of bathing suits or bikinis and things like that. And I could definitely see how maybe some of that might play into this in terms of like looking how other women look in a bathing suit versus how I look. Though I will say, it's changed, right? Like I remember being young and everyone in a bikini was always really skinny. Now when I go to the beach, that's just not the case. Like women, they're kind of just wearing what they want regardless of size, which I think is a good thing.
It's a good
That's a
thing.
good thing. Yeah, okay.
But I definitely can say, like growing up in Los Angeles, where image is such a big part of everything. Yeah, like I was certainly aware of all of this from a younger age. Luckily, never really fascinated by it. Like, you know, most of the time I was just sort of like, that lady looks a little different, trying to figure out why, or like, how does someone that thin have boobs that big? Like, that's not, that's not,
And
you
you
know.
know, some countries, I'll just say this, Mike, and I'll let you hop in. In some countries, I have a friend who lives in Thailand, and he's a photographer for World News. He used to be a photographer for Playboy. And he has some pictures of women over there. I mean, they'll have a 14, 15-inch waist and 44-inch hips. And it'll be huge up top. I mean, they look deformed, but over there, they think they look beautiful.
Right. The problem with that kind of thing, though, is it can cause health issues with, you know,
Mhm.
their back and their organs. Sometimes, like I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah,
people have ribs removed, and that can damage like your liver,
Mhm.
like all types of things. So I think that that's the issue right now, is that we don't even know all the health effects associated with all of these different things that people
You
are
said
doing.
organs removed.
I said organs removed. I said I meant to say ribs removed.
Oh,
People
okay.
have had ribs removed.
Oh, people have
You know,
ribs removed?
Your ribs protect your organs. So there have been people who've gotten their ribs removed so that their waist can look slimmer. But
Oh,
it's like,
man.
what's protecting your liver, your spleen, your heart, like all of those vital organs. That's why you have ribs.
Okay, okay.
I think Rob wants to know, why would you have your ribs removed?
Well,
Just to
that's
look
just
better. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. The look that you're talking about overseas, that usually that's how that's achieved. That's not real either. Like that's not a. So a lot of them are having surgery to have their ribs removed.
oh my God. I mean,
I
some of them they actually look deformed. I mean,
Yeah.
but they make money. They do it to make money because they can
That's
get
what I'm saying.
models
A lot
done.
of people, a lot of people do a lot of the stuff to be able to model or do different things like that.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you, Dr. Falcon, just as far as like, you know, when we talk about like propaganda and just, you know, we have a lot of conversations. And Dr. Evans too, you can feel free to jump in. But I just wanted to ask, as far as like, why do you think, like, what is the purpose of all of it? So I know that people are trying to make money, but my question I always try to ask is like, why is there so much messaging going on to women? So this is my theory. My theory, I feel like, is like, are they trying to get women to focus so much on beauty to the point where they don't get educated, so they can't compete with men? Are they trying to kick us out of the workplace? Like, what do you think about that, Dr. Falcon? Like, what do you think the purpose of all of it is?
I tend to think it's a little, I mean, I don't know that
Money.
yeah, I really think the bottom line is just money. And
Because see, y'all more consumers, y'all are more consumers than men. You know, hey, where the money? All my money my wife got, so I don't have any money. Anything I need, she buy for me. So I don't have any money.
yeah,
And
I
they
think
know that, they know that, they can appeal to, like I'll say, oh, that's red. Oh, that's rose. My wife would say, that's rose. I mean, she know every color in the crayon box. So she's like, okay, I'm just saying. So y'all know all that stuff. So somebody come in with some lipstick and they'll say, oh, that's teal, or that's so and so. I'm saying, look kind of green to me.
Right.
So therefore, y'all have a better eye for different things. Y'all catch things.
We've been, well, part of it is we've been socialized that way. You know what I mean? You learn that from a young age of like the performance of being a woman and knowing the difference between, because not everybody pays that much attention. Like, I don't pay that much attention to that sort of thing. So it's just one of those things of, being socialized to think that's important. So,
well, the only thing that
Doc or Mike Shomo, I'm trying to let Dr. Falcon tell me her opinion of what all of this means.
It really taking over, huh? Okay, go ahead. I was gonna let her say something. But
Stop trying to mansplain us. No.
Man, you're funny.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree.
You're my team.
I think the bottom line is money. And I think there's a history of it, right? Like there used to not be like the term tween, right? That like before you're a teenager, there used to not be a market for them. And now, and you even think about when we were kids, there were TV shows like set for a certain age, where before it was just like cartoons, and there was kind of nothing between cartoons and more like adult sitcoms. And so there's constantly, I think, trying to create consumers, right? And so they made kids consumers where they weren't maybe as, they were always consumers, but they weren't like the separate market. Okay, now market them for these specific ages, things for them, and then the teenager, and then, right? And so I think we just see that continuing to play out. In terms of what we can do about it and combat it, I'm always an advocate, obviously, for education. And so I think one of the big things, which is when I was teaching first year comp or in some of my research, and even though I'm not tailored to this specifically all the time, it's really just understanding how messages are composed, right? Writing is not just alphabetic text anymore, right? Like we communicate in all different ways using all different kinds of modes. And so it's understanding that everything is a carefully constructed composition. Like that's and that's something I always try to teach my students. And it's not to teach them to like everything's a conspiracy or be really suspicious of everything. It's just understanding like, okay, what is the purpose behind this? If it's a movie trailer, what does it make you want to think and feel about this film, right? How's it trying to draw you in? If it's a political ad, how are they trying to persuade you to vote for or against a candidate? If it's an informative article, okay, what angle are they taking? Is it purely informative, or are you seeing some opinion kind of come in? Are they always using data to support? And it's just kind of learning, teaching. I try to teach my students that, because my hope is that then maybe when they see an ad on Instagram that comes across because they like something else and everything's linked and all their data is tracked, right? That they can start to look at that differently and say, okay, I liked this post over here. Now I'm getting all of this because they're trying to sell me this, or they think this is something I'm interested in, and really start to kind of think about what that means for them. But, obviously we're seeing that this is something that's across the board hitting a lot of different areas, right? Like seeing how it's affecting mental health, looking at how it could be affecting physical health, right? Like you're talking about removing ribs and those protect your organs, right? Like and it seems so all encompassing. And I don't really know that there's a better place to start than just education from like across the board, right? From, I think everyone should have some kind of education as to not just what these messages really are or what they're promoting, but just kind of an understanding of like, these are all the ways it can affect you.
I totally agree with you, everything that you were just saying. It's just that, you know, especially now that, you know, you have a lot more marketing towards younger children now more than before. You're getting all of these like negative adaptations of body image that are becoming ingrained into children and adolescents. And so, you know, kids are kids, right? So teenagers, they want to do what their friends are doing. So if you have, you know, one person, well, this person got nails. I actually had a younger cousin who, you know, I was talking to her. She was like, you know, I want to get some nail extensions and I want to start wearing lipstick. And I'm like, okay, you're 13. You know, what types of things are you seeing? I'm trying to engage her and understand. She said, oh, I just want to look good. I want to look nice. I was like, you're a beautiful young lady with everything that you have right now, and trying to give her some encouragement. But she was already focused on enhancement because that is what other teenagers are talking about at that point in time. You know, she's told me, oh yeah, you know, they told me that I'm too fat. And I'm looking at her like, you're not, you're not too fat, you know, but these are the images that kids are being exposed to. And so I agree as well with education. And then also, you know, just like basic life training, you know, starting, you're never too young to start with, you know, having an understanding of who you are within yourself, besides, you know, okay, this is my body and this is what's going to happen to my body eventually, and I'm having all of this development, but really embracing those changes as they're happening throughout your lifetime, so that you can help them to, you know, be able to just, you know, accept themselves for who they are.
Right.
Can I say, you know, like at 13, you know, boys and young ladies, you know, their bodies are going through so many changes. Then when you're augmenting things, because I watch this show called Botch every now and then, and you know, some of the things that happen, you know, doing that plastic surgery or whatever kind of surgery it is, the augmentations and stuff and the implants, you know, that stuff could go dangerously wrong, you know, and especially you know, young girls, young ladies who are, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old, man, you know, because their body is still evolving, you know, and they end up like, you know, something happens and is not with their natural order, then it looks crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and then like sometimes that, because I saw like on the Real Housewives of Atlanta, Candy's daughter, Riley, she looked like she had gotten a nose job. But then during COVID, it looked like she gained weight. So it's like, you know, your body is fluctuating, all that sort of thing. People don't think about the fact that plastic surgery is not necessarily permanent. You might gain weight, your weight might fluctuate, like people get a lot of lipo and all this sort of stuff, but it's a lot of times they gain that weight back. So I think that people don't really think about the fact that, you know, like for me, I've been working out for 20 years. And it's one of those things of, it takes time, effort, and all that sort of thing to be consistent. And often as Americans, we want quick results without thinking about the fact that over time it's going to look different and it's going to change.
And they're still looking for that pill that'll knock that weight off. I see a thing on TV where it look like an Alka-Seltzer thing, and they got to think how somebody just dropped all the weight. That's they're trying to suck somebody in on that.
That's
Right.
But that's that's the whole thing. But I think one of the biggest things that I try to do with young people to encourage them is just try to get them to think about other stuff. I feel like part of what it is right now too is that, like, I feel like a lot of the social media and a lot of the messages we give to young people have them make them really hyper focused on themselves. And so one of the things that I talked about was, like, when I go to Haiti, they don't have a lot of mirrors. Like, we have all these mirrors. Everybody has a camera in their you know, they called a lot of the plastic surgery that happened during the pandemic, the Zoom boom. Because people were looking at their faces on Zoom, like, oh, I need to change this. Oh, I need to change that. Oh, I need to change this. So just trying to encourage them to go and do other stuff in reality. So that's one of the biggest things that they say to try to help kids, like, get out of that narcissism. You know, like, let's go into the real world, away from this mirror, away from this phone. Let's go do other stuff. And so just trying to do that, like, distraction. But also the other thing, like, you know, and just trying to build confidence in them, trying to find other things. Like, I had a patient the other day who showed me his daughter, and I said, oh, she is, you know, I said, you know, she was cute, but I'm like, you gotta find out what inspires her and what she's passionate about. Because I think that's what's, for me, that's why I'm like, what is the message you're trying to get to our young people? Because I feel like young people today are not being developed. Like, they're being marketed to, they're being consumed, like, told to consume these things, but what are their passions? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? Like, we're not nurturing them as people.
Well, when I was coming up, like in high school, including Bobby over here, they used to laugh at me, make fun because I always had a real size girlfriend. what they call a BBW today, because see, my mother, she was heavy and she was beautiful, so therefore I was attracted to, a heavier side woman. And the thing is that as we got older, all the little skinny girls that that they were after, they all are real size women now.
Right.
And I'm just
right. And that's the whole thing. You have a lot of people who like have like these mommy makeovers, and they're like, oh, before I had kids and all this sort of thing. And it'd be like, you realize your mom had you, right? Your mom had you, she birthed you, she is doing fine. Like, it's just like we try to give all these people these complexes about having kids, about gaining a little bit of weight when you have kids. That's very natural. And people will be like, well, I'm trying to get the body I had when I was a 16-year-old. And you're like, that is not reality. Like, we cannot
good luck with that one.
16-year-olds, our 16-year-old bodies. So it's very interesting.
Well, it really kind of caught my attention when I was talking with the photographer. And we're going through books, and he does a lot of celebrity shoots, and I said, well, she doesn't really look like that. He said, I know. He says, nobody looks that good. He said, I make them look that good. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He said, I'll make them look better than they look. And he actually does. I mean, he can take, a picture, a headshot or a 3/4 or full-length shot. And when he works his magic, it looks like the same person, but not the same person,
Right.
And I think when the reason he's so popular, because people like to see themselves like that. They like to see themselves looking better than they really look.
Well, you remember when they had the thing going around at the mall, the glamour shots.
Mm-hmm.
They had the wardrobe and everything. You could pick out
the glamour shots.
And they fix you up, put makeup on you. Because I was a professional photographer when I first came out of school and stuff. And like I got out of photography because of the dark room, but now there's no more dark room. Everything is digital. But so even with pictures, because we do cakes, and sometimes they want the pictures on the cakes and stuff, and I have to go in and edit it and make them look as good as possible. Have to lighten it up, having to do this, have to erase the blemish marks and different things. And with the computer and with these paint programs, you can do that, and actually make them. Had a guy say, "Wow, is that really my girlfriend?" I said, he said, "Oh, she looked like she's like 20 now." I said, okay, pay me extra for that.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like it used to be a process, but now people can just get apps and that sort of thing and just make themselves look like a whole other person with filters and the Photoshop apps and that sort of thing. And it really affects, like I was watching this like Trevor Noah show, and he had this, he had like something from, I think, ABC News. There was just like these plastic surgeons like exacerbated. Like it was plastic surgeons like frustrated. He's like, these young women, they come in and they want their eyes to look like anime eyes. He's like, those are not real eyes. He's like, so you could tell like they were just tired of having this conversation with young women who don't even have realistic expectations of what your face should look like.
Yeah.
Well,
let me ask you.
Oh, Dr. Falcon was going to say something. What were you going to say?
Now, what I find interesting about that is that a lot of young people, and I am kind of generalizing here, but a lot of them they have some kind of awareness, like they know about the filters, they use them. They will touch up their own pictures. They'll use different apps and things. And yet still, like even those of them that have that experience or will really focus on lighting and things like that to kind of have the best picture, will still then kind of fall into look at other pictures and be like, okay, but I want to look like that. And it's kind of interesting because you would think, okay, if you know that you are manipulating your picture, your photo, or this moment in some way, like why is there a disconnect between you looking at other photos and not saying that they're probably doing the same thing?
Right.
Exactly.
Do you think this has been any worse since the coronavirus lockdown, when people had more time? This is for you, Dr. Evans. People have more time on social media. Have you seen it get a lot worse in the last year or so?
Absolutely, because the kids were not going to school in person. So, a lot of kids or a lot adolescents in particular have, all of the social medias. And so, the Facebooks, this what's popular, Instagram, Snapchat, and now TikTok. And so they've got a lot more exposure in general than we had when we were coming up. But then the pandemic, because everyone was locked down and kids were getting distracted, they weren't in school, they didn't have the in-person socialization, and so there was a lot more focus online and inward. So I definitely think that that's is something that's been, and why at this point I certainly, and I mentioned it earlier, but I really I go back and forth. I really go back and forth in terms of, what is an appropriate age for kids to have social media and have those exposures, because, it really can be very damaging. Yes, there are some positive things, but, I'm seeing, hey, 13-year-olds are listening to music that I'm like, oh, okay, well, wait a minute. Or looking at World Star, and looking at these videos, and they're like, oh, this is really funny. And I'm like, that's violent. What do you
Right.
And so we're getting, some kids are getting really negative inputs. This is what they're sharing amongst each other. This is what they're finding funny. This is what's become popular. And it really, honestly, seeing some of those images and, even hearing some of it in, certain music at younger ages, it does, impact them cognitively.
So there's a desensitization and maybe an acceptance of that, you think?
Yeah, to an extent. You had mentioned violence before. I wasn't gonna, we can't get too deep into it, but actually Dr. Shomo, she last week she sent me and I went ahead and downloaded it and got through about a third of the book, when chicken heads come to roost, by Joan Morgan, and started reading through it. And so we were discussing violence in, music and, violence towards women. That was something that she covered very beautifully within the book. But, there is, to a certain extent, depending on, a person's, exposure, upbringing, and some of the traumas that they may have, that it's going to definitely impact them. And it can be desensitizing, especially if you have a constant negative influence that's around you, depending on where you are and what you're, being exposed to.
A lot of it is like the environment. So that's what Joan Morgan, I forgot to mention her book. Her book was it was a really good book.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she says in her book is like, when you think about like hip hop music and toxic masculinity and the hypersexualization of women and those kind of environments, she's like, a lot of it is a reflection of our environment, so it's just like she's just talking about like she talked about Tupac, and she's just like, where he found the most peace was in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that way for our Black men? Like, why are Black men finding only peace in jail? Why is their environment giving them all these messages? And she talked about, like, she's like, what's in this music? And this is from like 20 years ago. She's like, they're talking about women and, being dominating women. They're talking about drugs. They're talking about alcohol. She's like, it's depressing. Like, their reality is depressing. And that's what they talk about in music and the hip hop. And so that's the whole thing for a lot of these young people too. It's just one of those things of, a lot of them are products and reflections of their environment. So how do we change these environments?
Well, we go back to leadership again. We revisited that so many times, and setting the standards. And one of the things that I talked to Khalid Samad, a couple of times about, actually being involved in the community and having set standards. We don't have, a way that we operate, the way that we live every day. We talk about, being, religious and doing things. You have a lot of churches being built, churches being coming, and people going to church, but it's still so much crime and stuff, so
Right.
there's got to be some other people that's addressing these situations, because I would tell him that, we don't have a code of ethics. When we came up, we had basically a code of ethics that we were, like if you were doing something wrong, you didn't mess with people in your own neighborhood. You didn't mess with older people. You didn't mess with, women and children.
You didn't even swear in front of women.
Right, and
You
that's
could swear if it was the guys, but you would never swear in front of a woman.
right. And then men have to be men. We talked about this in the talk that I had given, and I said, the men have to step up. Like you have, we know that the crime is. We really have no hand as one to curb the crime. That's something that we have to get together with legislation, all parts of the government to curb the crime. But up until then, we have to teach our families not to be victims. You don't go out unescorted, in the late evenings and stuff. Our men.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just really try to help people be safe, but at the same time, you try to advocate for the neighborhoods to be better. Because a lot of it really just goes, a lot of it goes to the school to prison pipeline. Like I'm saying, they try to teach people to be consumers, to consume different things. They try to teach people, and then a lot of times people end up going to prison when they take those things that they can't figure out how to get because they don't have access to them. But it's just one of those things of, we've done a lot of things in this country as far as locking people up forever, not educating our youth, making them into consumers. So it's just at what point do you put people over money? And I feel like that's even like with this whole pandemic and all types of stuff. It's just like, it's so many examples of how our country has a lot of wealth and a lot of power to, do the right thing as far as nurturing our young people to be different, to be whatever they want to be, investing in them to not have their environments look so depressing, and getting them, whatever it is that they need, skills, job skills, education, whatever it is they need to succeed. And that's kind of what a lot of it is. A lot of it is just a failure of giving people any kind of hope to do anything other than what is just happening around them all the time.
See, it's with the police departments too, because they don't even come out anymore. You got to complain and stuff. They want you to come down, make it a state. They don't come out and investigate. In fact, they're after the fact. And one of them things is saying, they forget about McGruff. Remember the McGruff, the crime fighting dog? I mean, he was talking about McGruff. I mean, you may laugh and stuff, but he was talking about preventing crime, staying safe,
Right.
Before the crime happens. We come down here and the crime has already happened. And
Right.
the police want you to do the work, to investigate and tell them who did it.
Right.
I think a lot of times too, some of the solutions to lowering crime people don't like. I can remember, Times Square back in the 70s, there was drug dealers. If you go to Times Square to try to buy something, you had to get past the drug dealers, the prostitutes, the pimps. And that's what's Times Square. They'd be parked 3 rows deep. Bloomberg came with the stop and frisk. Times Square now is one of the safest places on earth, but people complained about the stop and frisk. So,
well, yeah, because that's a lot of profiling. A lot of people ended up in jail. So Jamie is from New York, so I saw you just have a big stop out there. But it's not necessarily.
Can you have your cake and eat it too? I mean, you got.
Well, the thing is, there's different ways that people have had. Like, that's one way to do it, is to crack, be tough on crime. But generally, as a nation, when we have cracked down and been tough on crime, it's black and brown people have lost their families, have been destroyed because of it. Like, all these people are being raised without parents. So it's just one of those things of, when people talk about there's no family values, part of it is because people have been going to jail for a long time, and there's a lot of people who are missing to raise these kids.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
A lot of data that supports the longer sentences don't do anything to lower crime anyway.
No, they don't. Yeah, well.
Yeah, but so there's what they did in other countries, what a lot of other countries did, instead of, because I remember reading this, I can't even remember where I read this, but it might have been a new Jim Crow, where they talked about how in the 70s, when, or the 60s and 70s, when they talked about when the US decided to, they were going to start locking up people and have the war on drugs, a lot of other countries decided they were going to make treatment centers, and they were going to support people and keep families together, and that sort of thing. And so and that's why the US has all these people, has had all these people in jail forever. And so it's just one of those things of, like, a lot of those kind of policies still impact us today, with not having a lot of values, not having a lot of people being nurtured and developed into people. And so now a lot of our young people are just confused. They're trying to find answers anywhere of, like, who to be, who to get, who to trust, who to look up to. There's just been a lot of impact in our society from that.
Okay.
Well, this has been we've covered a lot of ground here, so I hope for you watching, you were able to get something out of it. I think this is beauty standards and social media. It's not something that's going to go away. It's a serious problem. It affects self-image. I think it affects guys too. I think it affects women maybe more than guys, but it affects guys too. Guys getting, I read about a guy the other day that had, like you say, the pec implants, and then he had something done to his bicep surgically to make them bigger.
Like the bodybuilders.
Yeah, but so I'm like, whoa, where does it stop? But thankfully we have people in leadership positions like yourself to maybe help lead the way. With that, I can see some light at the end of the tunnel, because it's bad when you don't have anybody taking a lead, but it's obviously that you three have taken a lead, and so it's good to see that. Mike, any closing thoughts?
Us taking over our show.
Okay,
I had a wonderful
and with
time.
that, I'll let
I had a wonderful time, and I want everybody to know, I'm running for councilman in Ward 4. We have a rally this Saturday on the 31st at 13905 Kinsman Avenue in the parking lot of the cafe, Southern Cafe. And I hope to see it's a free event. It's from 1 to 3. You're just coming out. We got free refreshments. You don't have to make a donation, but we'll take it if you want to make one. And but it's a free event, and I hope everybody could come out. And as long as the food lasts, you can eat. All right.
And we want to thank you, Dr. Evans, Dr. Falcon, and Dr.Anisa Shomo. We certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Unfortunately, we probably can't meet your hourly rate, but if you come on again. So, Dr. Shomo, any closing thoughts?
No, yeah. Thank you for having us. This is a good conversation, but I think, one of the biggest things for a lot of what we do as physicians and professors is we can be fairly political. And I think that that's part of, a conversation tonight. We think about how a lot of this is affecting our youth, but we also have to think about how we can organize locally, vote in the best interest for our young people and ourselves, and stay engaged. And I'm just proud of my dad, Mike Shomo, for trying to make a difference in his community. Because I know one of the biggest things on your platform and things you want to address is trying to get young people employed. The teen pregnancy rate in Ward 4 is really high, so just trying to figure out how can we inspire and nurture our young people to be more than beauty standards and all that sort of thing.
Okay, well, we thank you for your time, audience, and unfortunately ours is up, but until we meet again, which will be next week, same time, stay safe, wear your mask. I always say that, some people don't, but I still wear mine.
For sure. Right now, we
try to
definitely
stay healthy, so we want to see you again next week. So take care, and with that, good night.
Thanks, you ladies. And you too, Rob.